your finish breathes, it's fire resistant, and I think it's so important today that materials breathe. We are so focused at the moment on building materials that insulate and keep the elements out. I believe that this will be a mistake. In the future, we will look back at this moment in time and say we made a mistake. As a designer, my concern is always greenwashing, so I'm always digging deep to try and find the truth in a material and I'm always skeptical that it's not quite as sustainable as what it's often claimed. This is the opposite. It's like much more sustainable than I even dreamed. And coming here and seeing, witnessing the harvesting of this incredible cork and witnessing the whole process, the amount of waste that is currently generated that you guys are using and turning into these materials also gives me a lot of confidence to know that if it becomes an idea that becomes mainstream, there's enough. And it helps these people to keep, doing what they're doing. So, yeah, I just get so much satisfaction out of seeing the whole process and understanding how sustainable it really is. And, that you've got a smell here that you can't capture obviously on camera, but the fact that this tree, is a few hundred years old and has been harvested probably 20, 30 times. And the evidence of the harvests are all here from previous people. Who knows, this one here might have been 150 years ago. I find that just staggering. And, the ultimate circular idea. I love also that these guys are in the background climbing trees and, we're in the middle of it. Well, trying to find truly sustainable finishes for buildings is really difficult, and it's almost impossible. And this coating really mimics what this tree does. Your finish breathes, it's fire resistant, and I think it's so important today that materials breathe. We are so focused at the moment on building materials that insulate and keep the elements out. I believe that this will be a mistake. In the future, we will look back at this moment in time and say we made a mistake. Our houses need to be like trees. The outside of the house needs to breathe. And what your material does is it basically copies what the bark of a tree does. And that's why I'm so fascinated with using it. Well, I think what we're sitting in a solution, a global solution. The world's biggest problem is desertification. We've lost 100 million hectares of land in the last 10 years, and it's happening faster. So the problem is escalating. And I believe that this is a solution to stop desertification and to reverse the desertification. And what I've witnessed in the areas is that it provides protection for wildlife, habitat for wildlife, for birds, but it also provides shade for livestock. And what's so fascinating about this species is that it pulls very little from the soil. It doesn't take nutrients from the soil, and it doesn't seem to, like you find grass and pasture growing everywhere underneath these trees, and that's critical. So in Australia, we use, for shelter and windbreaks and to stop salinity, we plant eucalyptus trees. But the problem with them is that no pasture can grow underneath. So it's barren ground, and it also takes a lot of water out of the water table. This tree doesn't require a lot of water, and it also, if it does suffer fire or a lightning strike, it will actually recover and respond really well. So as a pioneer species for reversing desertification, I think this is in the top 2-3 species on the planet. And I think we need to look at Sardinia as a solution to this global problem. And we need to stop thinking in 2, 3, 5 years. We need to start thinking in 100, 200 years. And to solve this problem, we need to start thinking about planting trees now that may not yield for 25 years, but it's the ultimate problem solver, because it solves so many other things, because it comes at, I call it a foundation species. So once you plant this, other things can come and add to the landscape, and it's the ultimate habitat creator. Once you've got this as a foundation, other things can thrive. But also, what's unique about Sardinia is that this just translates into agricultural areas as well. You have in most countries a real definition of hard landscape, agricultural landscape, and wild landscape. Here the two seamlessly blend. So you've got the farmers respecting the trees, and the trees aren't cut down on forests. You've got wheat growing in amongst cork trees. And then when that wheat the animals go on to eat the straw, they've got shade from the trees. So yesterday we bypassed cows and sheep sitting underneath the shade of these oak trees. Well, I mean, if my buildings that I design my goal is to build the most resilient buildings on the planet. So resilient to bushfire, resilient to storms. I want to design buildings that can last 500, 600, 1,000 years and enhance the landscape, not take away from the landscape. But most importantly, I want to create buildings that are comfortable to be in, that are non-toxic. So I'm obsessed with this idea of organic certification for houses, because we eat organic food, or we obsess about having natural wines, food that isn't sprayed, but we don't think about the building materials that we use, which is crazy. We need to start thinking about what surrounds us, because we now know that the air that we breathe has a really almost a quicker impact on our microbiome than what we eat. And our gut bacteria is like a defense mechanism against toxins and puts them away. But when we breathe in toxins, it's really problematic. And the UN estimates that up to 100,000 people a year die just from indoor air pollution. And so we need to completely turn on its head the way we build, what we use, and start using the same systems as what we use for food, I believe. The first thing that people say when they come you've been to my house, first thing that people say is, it feels different. You walk in, the sound. When you use truly sustainable materials and build to last, you get it feels like a home. And it does that because the sound gets absorbed by the material, because the materials breathe. We tend to, in the last 50 years, put hard surfaces on everything, which means that the building materials can't absorb humidity, can't absorb sound. It's like a hard mirror surface. I do the complete opposite. All my materials aren't sealed. All my materials are porous and breathe, and that, I think, makes the person that inhabits the spaces that I design feel much more comfortable. My ultimate goal is to transport this idea to Australia. So in 100 years from now, when I'm long gone, if we have a cork industry like this in Australia, that's my goal. It's a long-term goal, but that's my goal, because I think what I'm witnessing here is the future. And if we don't start to think locally and don't start to use the materials that can enhance agriculture, so I use straw, the world's most wasted resource. There's 500 million farmers that produce straw, and it's the world's largest polluter of the air, much more than cars, planes, trains, trucks, the burning of straw. And so I'm obsessed with using straw, and straw is made in almost every country. And that's the foundation of my buildings. And then I use your system to seal the material and to weatherproof the material in a sustainable way. And both those things can come from the same environment. We're not needing to get it from a plantation forest, or we don't need to import it from another country. They're all byproducts and can enhance the agricultural process. So in Australia, we have the potential to have 20 million hectares of forests like this that can also be grazing land. So I'm thinking really long term. For me, this is something that I hope will be a catalyst for change in Australia and in the United States and other countries. I think human beings are quite stupid and naive to not respect and appreciate the past. There's so much knowledge that we just have simply disregarded because we think we're smarter, it's all about new innovation, right? So for me, my number one inspiration is the past, because I think there's so much knowledge that was gained over generations that we need to embrace. But I also believe that we can use that knowledge to create a better future. And so I really believe that architecture can save us. I think we can build buildings that can create habitat. We can actually build buildings that restore the environment. By using materials like this, we actually restore the environment rather than take away from it. And that, to me, is a shift that we need to make happen. The building is 3,000 years old, but you walk in and you feel comfortable. I felt more comfortable in that 3,000-year-old building than in any building that's been built in the last 200 years here. So, why can't we learn from the past and design like they did? There was no air conditioning. There was lots of fresh air. You felt cool. You felt like the air was cycling. There was no stale air. It didn't feel like a cave. And it's genius. Why haven't we embraced that simple idea in our modern buildings? Now we need electricity. We constantly need to do all these things to try and keep our place cool. Yet 3,000 years ago, they designed these places that were stable in temperature, warm in winter, cool in summer. I'm really concerned with the well-being of animals, and in Australia it's very hot. It gets, like here, we can get up to 45, 50 degrees, and there's a lot of loss of protection for animals. We have clear land, no trees. My goal is to introduce this idea that we can actually plant cork trees that can have multi-purposes and yield so many benefits, not just the cork, but the shade and the biodiversity and the space for birds and wildlife. And so the way that animals are raised in Sardinia, to me, is the way that animals should be raised. They have a good life, and they have protection from the heat of the sun, and they have this incredible biodiversity of plants. You don't just see one species of grass growing in a Sardinian field. There are literally hundreds of different species growing, so the animals can access all the different things. Imagine if we had to eat the same thing every day, and have no protection from the elements. So they've got wind protection, they've got protection from the cold, they've got protection from the sun, and they've got this incredible array of herbs and grasses that they can eat. And to me, that's what we should be striving for in the Western world. I think it's important for people when they do their craft to understand where the materials end up. So obviously these people know that their materials become cork, but when they saw the fire test that I did, you could see, their faces light up. What? That's your material on the outside of that building. And I think it just gives you so much satisfaction and, a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging to a community is really important. And you really get that with people like this. They're doing something that they really love doing. And I hope through what we do, we can encourage young people to start doing this as well. Because this is not something that you do all year round either. It's a job that you do for a very short season, which makes it an exciting job, especially for the new young generation.